Hey guys, today we're going to start Unit 5. We're going to talk about similar and congruent figures today. In fact, today is going to be a lot of definitions. The cool part is in the long run, this unit is going to flow right into proportions. In fact, we're going to be using proportions to find out more about similar figures. But before we do that, let's just learn the vocabulary today. We're going to learn what is a similar figure, what is a congruent figure, and what are corresponding sides and angles, and what happens whether they're proportional or whether they're congruent. So stick with me again. It's going to be a lot of vocabulary, but hopefully this will be the easy part for you, especially if math is difficult for you, because we're mostly just going to be talking about vocabulary. All right, so let's get started. So if you look here down at the notes, it says similar shapes and congruent shapes. Now, similar shapes, they must have the same shape. Now, I want you to think about a square. Put it in your head. Think about a square. You got it? You thinking? You got the picture in your head? All right, now I want you to think about another square. It's a square and it's twice as big. Do you got it in your head? So even though the square is twice as big, it's still a square, isn't it? Right? Because it has the same shape, but it has a different, and we're going to write this in, size. That's what makes it similar. If you had two squares and they were exactly the same shape and the same size, then they would be congruent. So let's fill that in on the right hand side. Congruent shapes must have the same shape and size. So that's what we're looking at. Those are our two main things today: congruent, same shape, same size, and then similar, same shape, but a bigger or a smaller size. So when we're talking about similar shapes, we're going to use this symbol right here. And I want you to just go ahead and draw it in. I'm going to draw it right here. It's kind of a little wiggly. I want you to draw it too, just so you have the experience of drawing that. Good job. All right, now for a congruent symbol, I'm going to circle it right here. It's the same squiggly, but there's an equal sign under it. So I want you to go ahead and draw that. Good job. Now, you won't really have to draw that congruent symbol again, but you will have to recognize it. So when you see it, you know that it's telling you that the two things it's comparing are congruent. Congruent means same size, same shape. Now, let's go back to the picture in your mind with the square and then the square that's twice as big. Now, I don't know if you remember this, but squares, each corner is 90 degrees. Now, if I make that square twice as big, would the angles be twice as big or would they still be 90 degrees? They would still be 90 degrees. They have to be for it to be a square. Now, this is super important to remember. So looking back at our notes, corresponding angles, I'm going to put a star right here, are exactly the same size. And for congruent, for corresponding angles for congruent, they are also exactly the same size. This is a simple idea, and you're going to see it again and again. So try to stick it in your head. If I have a square that is 1 inch tall, or if I have a square that's a mile tall, they're still both going to have 90-degree angles because that's what makes it a square. But what about the sides? Now, if they're congruent, if they're exactly the same size, then the sides will be exactly the same size. But if going back to those original two squares you had in your mind, the one that's twice as big, the sides will be twice as big. So corresponding sides, looking back here, I'm going to put a star because you're going to have to remember this. Corresponding sides are proportional. So again, going back to that square, if one side is twice as long, then all the sides have to be twice as long. So it is still a square when we're done with it. All right, so what does this word corresponding means? Oh, and back to congruent, the sides are also congruent. The sides and the angles are both congruent. Okay, but what is corresponding? Corresponding is like matching. So we have a definition here for the for corresponding, and it's just matching. So again, if you go back to these two squares and you're trying to find corresponding sides, you have to find matching sides. Now for a square, that's pretty easy because they're all the same size. But what about a rectangle? What about if I take a rectangle and flip it and turn it? In other words, I have two similar rectangles, but I turn one upside down, or I turn it this way, or turn it that way. It can be kind of confusing, especially if the sides are pretty close in length. So how do I match up sides in those situations? How do I find corresponding sides? Now, if they tell you the name of the rectangle, like they do in this first example, they say it is quadrilateral ABCD is similar to quadrilateral WXYZ. It's telling you it's matching everything up for you. Watch what I'm about to do. This is something you could try too when you're trying to do assignments like this. So A is the first angle, B is the second, C is third, D is fourth. For the second one, it would be the same order because the order they write it is the order they're calling it out in regards to comparing these two shapes. So just looking at those shapes, it's easy for me to tell what corresponds. Now, for angles, there is a way that they will show matching parts that sometimes you have to look at what the symbols as opposed to me giving you the name of the shape, like quadrilateral ABCD. What if it didn't say that? Well, it might use a different way to match the sides. And so I'm going to show you what they'll do to show matching or corresponding angles. So if A, if you look, is going to match with W. So I'm going to write it down here because it's the first question. I'm going to put a little line on that half circle that I made for A, and I'm going to find the W, and I'm going to do the same exact thing, and that tells me that they go together. Now I'm going to do it for the next angle. It's B. For B, I'm going to put two little lines, and B matches up with X, and so I'm going to find X, and I'm going to put two little lines. And I can do the same for C. C, I'm going to go ahead and put 1, 2, 3, and it's going to match with Y. 1, 2, 3. And then we already know that D is going to have to go with the Z. And I'm not going to mark that just to save time. So even though we have these two shapes, one's a little bit bigger than the other, they're flipped and they're turned. I was able to match them up pretty easily. But what about the angles? If A matches up to W, what do you know? And A is 108. What do you know about W? It's going to be exactly the same, 108 degrees. What has the same measurement as angle B? Well, the corresponding angle will, because corresponding angles are going to be congruent. So B matches up to X. So they're just little kind of tips and tricks. All right. The last one is matching up sides. I'm going to use the same technique I did earlier. Now, when they name the rectangle or name whatever the shape is, the order of the letters, if they tell you that these two are similar, the order of the letters or the corners that they're listing are going to match up and tell you what the corresponding angles and sides are. So what does that look like? If I look at this rectangle here that they mentioned, it starts with HJ. So I'm going to put a little 1 by HJ. If I look at the second one, it says it starts with MN. So guess what? These two correspond. Now I'm just going to be real smart about this. After the HJ is the K. So that's 2. And I'm just going to go ahead and go all the way around 1, 2, 3, 4. And on the other one, it says MNQ. So if the next letter is Q, I know I'm going to be going in this direction. I'm just going to go around, and wasn't that easy? Now everything's matched up, and I don't really have to think about it. Because when they take these shapes and they flip them and they turn them and all, it does get confusing. Now, most of the shapes that you're going to see are not going to be flipped and turned. So these two examples are about as hard as it gets. All right. So let's answer these questions now that we've just done the pre-work. So HJ goes with MN. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to write this both ways, but you don't have to. Just so you know, the order doesn't matter. MN is the same as NM. It doesn't matter. HL, let's see, that is, HL is number 4, so that's going to go with the PM. And I could write it both ways, but you don't have to. I'm just showing you so you don't wonder which direction you need to write those letters. It doesn't matter. LK, let's see, LK is number 3, so that's going to be with PQ. And JK, let's see, JK is number 2, so that's going to go with QN. So a lot of cool little tricks to use. I hope you wrote this all down in your notes. They're really good notes, and they're really going to help you with the assignment and actually the rest of this unit. Good luck. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.